Hey guys, welcome back. If you're new here, my name is Becca and today I'm going to be talking about the series that I have DNF'd, completed and I'm up to date on as of the midpoint of 2021. So I do my series check-in video twice a year. For the end of the year version, I combine everything together, so you will also have the series that I have started or made progress on but haven't finished. But for the mid-year version, I make that into two separate videos. So this one is going to be my DNFs, the series that I have completed, whether I started and finished them in 2021 or just finished them in 2021, and the series that I'm up to date on, which means that I have read everything that is currently published and there is nothing else in that series going to be published as far as I'm aware for the rest of 2021. And then all of the series that I've started or continued on with but haven't finished will be coming in my next video. So I've counted up all of the series for the entire two parts of this video and I have less series than I did last year, but I have a considerably smaller amount of series that I've finished and I'm up to date with this year. So I don't know whether this is good or bad because my main focus since 2019 pretty much is to reduce the amount of series that I'm currently in the middle of, which means where possible not starting new series and prioritizing sequels wherever I can. But last year I had about 15 completed DNFs and continuations, and this year I only have 10, but I have the same amount of series that I need to finish. So I don't know if it's good or bad. I don't know if I'm succeeding at this point yet, but we are going to get cracking with this video, starting with my DNF. So the DNFs for this year, I do not actually remember too much about them, which is the reason why they are DNFs. They just really did not leave an impression on me at all. Sadly, they are both self-published fantasy romance series, the first one being Children of the Fallen by Erin Bedford. So I read the first book in this series, Death in Her Eyes. This one is a paranormal series that follows a young girl who is kidnapped at her mother's funeral by her absentee father and sent to attend a school for Nephilim. She is Nephilim, but she didn't know, and she has the ability of knowing, well, it's more like a curse really. When she touches people, she knows when they are going to die. So I only read the first book in this series. It was 190 pages and I just found that there was a lot going on and it was a bit too short. I wasn't feeling like the romance in it. I didn't enjoy the world building. I didn't really care much about the plot. So yeah, I don't even know if the sequel to this is published yet. It wasn't at the time that I read it, but regardless, I will not be continuing. The second series that I'm DNFing is the Bound to the Fae series by Eva Chase. This one is I think it's like a portal fantasy romance, and in this one our main character has been held captive by the people who brutally murdered her family for a number of years, and they have been doing so because they want her blood. Her blood has a unique ability. Four Fae men rescue her from captivity and she goes to live on their estate, and it is a reverse harem story. So I read the first book in this series, which was Captive of Wolves, and I enjoyed it considerably more than I enjoyed Death in Her Eyes. I really liked the writing in here. I liked the setting. I don't know if reverse harem stories are for me. It's kind of like, because you're building a relationship with multiple love interests, and because I'm somebody who likes extensive character development, I don't know whether that will ever be enough for me to actually feel the romance elements. My main problem with this one is that I felt that it was a little bit too long-winded. The first book is 362 pages, so not incredibly long, but I felt like I would have enjoyed more story and character progression throughout, and overall I'm just not interested enough to continue really. So moving on to the series that I finished, this is actually an embarrassingly small stack. We have 4 of these. The first one is The Merciful Crow by Margaret Owen. This is a young adult high fantasy duology that predominantly follows a young woman called Fi, who is a crow. The world in here is split into castes, and the castes are named after birds, and every caste has a birthright. So the Phoenix caste are right at the top. They are the royalty, and their birthright is the ability to harness and control fire. The crows are right at the bottom of the pile, and there is a lot of prejudice surrounding them Kingdom, and they actually do not have a birthright. However, they can access the birthright of the other castes if they touch their bones. So the crows actually perform a essential task in this world as they remove the bodies of the sinner's plague from the villages, the towns and the cities to stop the contamination spreading. And the reason that they do this is that they are actually immune to the plague. They also take teeth as payment for the service, and they use those teeth to access the birthrights of the caste. So I read this first book back in 2019, and I finally read the sequel, The Faithless Hawk. I really enjoy this world. I find it to be a quite unique one. It also has a very distinctive writing style, which I know is one of the reasons why quite a few people don't like this duology, but I personally really enjoy the writing style in here. I think that there is a lot of depth and intricacy to the magic and the world, considering that both of these books are under 400 pages. There's also a romance subplot in here that I enjoyed, and I just found, considering the length of these books, them to be a very, not necessarily impactful in terms of them being overly emotional or anything, but this is a series that I will definitely remember because of the unique elements of it. I also finished the Bargainer series by Laura Thalassa. This is the second book because I lent the first book to a friend and have not got it back yet, but this one is a new adult portal fantasy romance where we are following a siren called Callie, and she has a string of black beads that wind all the way up her arm. Each bead represents a debt that she owes to the bargainer, and the bargainer always collects. It's very unusual to have more than one or two debts outstanding with the bargainer as well, whereas Callie has hundreds. Callie also hasn't seen the bargainer in 7 years, but she knows that he is going to collect. It is just a matter of time. So the first book in this series is told in 2 timelines. We have 7 years in the past where Callie was accruing all of these debts and when she met the bargainer, and then we have the present day timeline where the bargainer has finally come to collect. So in 2021 I read the novella Emperor of Evening Stars and also the final book in this series, which is Dark Harmony. This is one of my favorite fantasy romance series. I really love the romance. Desmond Flynn is one of my favorite love interests that I've ever read in a series. I find it really compelling, and while the first book does mainly focus on the main characters that are romantically involved and the romance elements of the story, there is actually also a decent fantasy plotline throughout the second 2 books in this series. So overall I think it's a very well-rounded fantasy romance series that delivers on both the romantic elements and also the fantasy elements. Another fantasy romance series I finished is The Bridge Kingdom by Danielle L. Jensen, and I've only really kind of finished this because The Bridge Kingdom is going to be a 6-book series. However, it is a series of duologies. So in terms of it being a series of duologies, I have read the first 2 books which make up the first duology, but there will be 6 books and they'll all have like an overarching plot. I think that's how it's gonna work. But The Bridge Kingdom follows a young woman called Lara, who is one of 12 sisters who have been kept in the desert. They are all princesses, and their father sent them to the desert to train to be assassins. The reason he did this is that there is a peace treaty with the Bridge Kingdom wherein one of the king's daughters is going to go and marry the king of the Bridge Kingdom. So the king has been training his daughters to be assassins, so when one of them goes to fulfill that treaty, they can assassinate the Bridge King. And the reason they want to do this is that the Bridge Kingdom, as you can imagine, has a very large bridge in it that is controlled by the Bridge Kingdom, and this bridge serves as the main trade route throughout the realm, and the main character's father would very much like to control this. So this is a duology that I really enjoyed. I really like the romance in here, although it is very slow burn, and I would say that while there is an underlying romance theme throughout, it is not the focus or the dominant point in the story, because this is also largely a political fantasy. So I really enjoyed the writing style, I want to say, in here above anything else. I think that if you're a fan of like Throne of Glass by Sarah J Maas, this is a series that you might really enjoy. And once again, considering these books are so small, I think that they do a very good job at development and also pacing, because while these books are short, they're not very fast paced, but I do think that they still manage to deliver a good amount of like world building, action scenes and romance. And the last series I have completed is the Live Ship Traders by by Robin Hobb. This is the second trilogy in the Realm of the Eldling series. This one is a multi-perspective adult high fantasy that is set in a different part of the world to the first trilogy in the Realm of the Eldlings, and the plot in this one mainly surrounds the trading families of a coastal town called Bingtown. So the trading families all have these big wizardwood ships that come to life when a member of 3 generations of the family have died on the deck. So this story starts off where Althea Vestra is just coming home from a trade journey by sea, and she finds out that her father is dying, and she always thought that after her father died she would be the one to inherit the ship. However, just before her father dies, he tells her that he's actually decided that the ship is going to go to her older sister and her older sister's husband. This sets off a whole chain of events where Althea is trying to get her ship back. We also have a plot with a pirate who wants to be the king of the Pirate Isles, and he thinks that the way to do this is to capture himself a live ship. And while we have a lot of small town politics in here focusing on Bingtown and the various members of the Vestrit family, we also have some larger politics of the world and also a lot of expansion and clarity regarding a lot of the magical elements of the Realm of the Eldlings as a whole. So this is currently my favorite series in the Realm of the Eldlings so far. I think that I prefer the multi-perspective fantasy style as opposed to first-person perspective being locked in Fitz's head in the Farseer trilogy. I also found this series to be a little bit more of like an adventurous fantasy story. Like, we have sea battles and stuff, there's magical creatures. I also really liked how we got some of the true origins of the magic in here, because I think with the Farseer trilogy it is a little bit more of an unreliable narrator, with everything we hear being pretty much the extent of Fitz's knowledge, where in here we have multiple characters doing multiple things around the world and finding out all kinds of different information. I started the Live Ship Traders at the end of last year, and I did read the conclusion in 2021, which was actually my least favorite book in the series, but overall I thoroughly enjoyed this one. And I'm really sad because while the Realm of the Eldlings revisits the character of Fitz in 3 separate series, this is the only series that predominantly follows these characters. And while I believe the Rainwild Chronicles goes back to some of the characters from the series and parts of the world that are mentioned in this series, I don't think it's a direct continuation like it is with all of the Fitz books. And finally for this video, the 4 series that I am currently up to date on. The first one of those is the Blood and Ash series by Jennifer L. Armentrout. This one is an indie high fantasy romance series that follows a young woman called Poppy who is the Maiden. She is thought to have been chosen to ascend by the gods, and she's pretty much kept in captivity where she's not allowed to experience pleasure, she's not allowed to be looked upon, and she's also not allowed to be touched. And the love interest in here is a skilled guard called Hawk, who has been tasked with guarding Poppy until her ascension. Now that is pretty much all I can tell you about this, because the exact fantastical and maybe supernatural elements of this are revealed throughout the course of this book, as the characters' knowledge is limited, so you kind of learn the specifics along with the characters. I mean, it is easy enough to find out what kind of creatures they are online, I just personally prefer not to say. But I read From Blood and Ash in 2020, I read Kingdom of Flesh and Fire and Crown of Gilded Bones in 2021. Crown of Gilded Bones is one of my most disappointing books of the year. Was not so much of a fan of that in comparison to the first 2. But the first 2 books in this series, I really enjoyed the romance and the chemistry between the characters. I don't really like the way that Jennifer L. Armentrout world builds, because even though it can kind of be explained away with, as I said, you're learning the fantastical elements along with the characters, I personally find it to be quite lazy world building. There's also a lot of telling and not showing in this series. So in the 3rd book in particular, you will have chapters of Poppy sitting down with another character and they will just like feed her all of the information about the world building and the fantasy elements and the history of the world. And there's also like 2 villain monologues in the first 3 chapters of Crown of Gilded Bones. I also find especially Crown of Gilded Bones to be very repetitive in parts, in just ways that it needed to be edited out essentially. So at the moment there are 3 books published in this series, and I think that the next one is going to be published at the beginning of 2022. There is a spin-off to this series coming in October, but I'm not really counting that as part of this series. I'm counting it as like the start of a new series, and I think it's a prequel that follows some of the gods of the world. So yeah, I'm up to date. I will definitely be continuing. I just hope it picks up after Crown of Gilded Bones, and it's really sad as well because because the last 50-60 pages of Crown of Gilded Bones were 5-star material, but I just didn't like any of the rest of it. We then have the Bone Season by Samantha Shannon. I've read the first 3 books in the series twice, and then I read The Mask Fallen in 2021 when it was released, and I think it's going to be a good couple of years until the next book is released. But this one is like a new adult paranormally sci-fi fantasy series that takes place in a dystopian futuristic version of London where it is illegal to be a clairvoyant. Our main character, Paige Mahoney, is indeed a clairvoyant, and one day when she is traveling to visit her father, she is caught using her abilities and taken to this mysterious location with some mysterious creatures that really throws open the world. So I really like the world in this series. It is very detailed and very well developed. I remember the first time I read this, it's a struggle to understand what's going on in the first 100 pages or so, but I found when I got into it I was very invested. There are some characters in here that I really love. Samantha Shannon is not afraid of hurting her characters. There's some emotional moments as well, and The Mask Fallen I particularly enjoyed as well because it's set in a different part of the world. It's set in Paris as opposed to London, which is where the majority of the rest of the books are set. That one served as a bridge book between 2 story arcs, the first one being the first 3 books, and the second story arc will be books 5 to 7. So it mainly focused on the main characters dealing with what had happened in the first 3 books in the series, recovering from that, and starting to take the story in a new direction, which I think is going to be just like a wider, more encompassing plot as a whole that takes on the world as opposed to like certain areas of it. But I can't say for certain yet because none of the other books are released. One where I'm pretty sure that the sequel isn't going to be released this year is The Ravens by Cass Morgan and Danielle Page. This one is the first book in a new adult contemporary fantasy series that centers around a sorority of witches called the Ravens. We are following 2 characters in here. One of them is like a legacy member of the sorority. All of her family have been in the sorority and have been the president of it, and the other character is one who didn't even know that she was a witch until she attends this university and she ends up joining the Ravens sorority. These 2 main characters very quickly dislike each other, however they have to band together when a wicked power rises to terrorize the sorority. I really enjoyed this and I was surprised at how much I enjoyed it because low fantasy is not usually my favorite, and I'd never read anything from Cass Morgan and Danielle Page before, but I really enjoyed the witchy elements in here. I thought that it was fast-paced and fun. I really enjoyed the sorority setting, and I think it had a good balance of like the bitchy, just like general sorority stuff that you see like stereotypically portrayed in teen movies, and also the witchy elements. It did also have a mystery element to the plot, and I really enjoyed the progression of that, and I believe I was also surprised by the reveal of that mystery element as well, where I'd thought that I kind of had it figured out and the actual answer was not what I expected. So I'm really excited actually for the sequel to this to come out. I think this one was released in January in the UK, but a little bit earlier in the US, so I'm assuming that the sequel will also be out in January in the UK, which I do think is an odd time for this to be released because it is a perfect like spooky October read. And the final series I am now up to date on is the Akita series by Sarah J Maas. So I read the first 3 books in this series for the first time between the years of like 2015 and 2017. However, A Court of Silver Flames was released in 2021, and of course I picked that one up as soon as it was in my hands. So the first part of the series, the first trilogy, follows a young woman called Feyre who accidentally kills a fey wolf shifter, and because of this she is taken to the fairy realm where she must live out the rest of her days as a punishment for the life that she took. The first trilogy wraps up the story arc of this, and then the new book that's just been released is the first book in a new story arc where there will be different main characters of each book. So book 4 followed Nesta and Cassian. It followed Nesta dealing with the repercussions of the trilogy. Essentially, she has just been an unbearable person, so everyone tells her that she has to go get her shit together and sends her away, and it is about her dealing with all of those repercussions and also dealing with like PTSD, coming to realize that the way that she has been handling her emotions is not actually the best way, and like working through that. It also deals heavily in like trauma and recovery, while also having a little bit of a fantasy plotline in there that affects like all all of the characters and the world as a whole. So the Akita series is one of my favorite series of all time. That is not a secret on this channel. A Court of Silver Flames I did really enjoy, but mainly for the character development of Nesta and all of the mental health and trauma rep in there, whereas the actual fantastical plot line I did not find to be as high stakes or intricate or complex as I'm usually used to with Sarah J Maas. That being said, I still loved it, and I will pick up the next one whenever that is released, which I think is probably going to be 2023. So for the moment I am up to date, but there are definitely at least 2 more books to come, I think, in the Akita series. So there you have it. Those are all of the series that I've DNF'd completed and I'm currently up to date on in 2021. My next video, I think, is going to be the second part of this, which is the 20, I think, series that I would like to complete in 2021 because I have started them or made progress on them, but I'm not quite there yet. So please do stay tuned for that if you are interested. Down in my comments, please let me know what series you have DNF'd in 2021, where you've read 1, maybe 2 books and you just cannot continue. But aside from that, guys, please don't forget to like this video if you liked it and subscribe if you wanna. If you head to my description box, you'll find links to my Goodreads, Instagram and Twitter if you'd like to follow me on any of those, as well as links to my Bookish candle website, the Instagram for that, and a 10% off discount code. But that's it from me today, guys. Bye!
Oh, you bite your friend like chocolate. You say you'll go where nobody knows, with guns hidden under our petticoats. We're never gonna quit it, no, we're never gonna quit it, no.